friends, Stephanie here from Classy Lady Yarnworks. Just coming to you today with a tip for how to take your baskets, use some canvas, like a plastic canvas, and a pair of scissors, and a plain old tapestry needle, and vastly improve the quality and usability of your crocheted baskets. So, easy peasy, we're going to take a piece of plastic canvas and we're going to cut it to be just a tad shorter than the basket that we want it to fit into. And then we're going to curl this up and slip it right inside. So you can see I made it just a tiny bit shorter so that it'll sit down inside there, and then I'm going to thread my tapestry needle. I'm just going to do a simple whip stitch around the top of this. And I'm going to stitch it into the loop on the top of the stitch that's closest to the inside. So the inside loop, I guess I should say. So I'm just going to put one single whip stitch in each stitch going all the way around the top. Nothing fancy. And attach this canvas to the basket. So I'm going to speed this video up and then show you what it looks like when it's all done. So I'm just get these last couple of stitches in here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and clip this off, and you're gonna want to sew those tails in just like you would any finished crochet piece. You'll just take those tails and sew them in. But for right now, I'm just gonna show you the way that this looks. You can see that this basket's just now, it's got some nice sturdiness to it. It's a little more rigid. It's going to be great for holding hooks or pencils, pens. You can put a liner in the bottom of it to help protect the bottom of the basket. But yeah, this just makes those sides more rigid, and it just makes your basket a little bit sturdier, a little easier to use. I like the way that the whip stitch looks. This is my preferred way to attach the canvas because I think it just makes a nice clean border around the top. But I'm going to go ahead and show you another method. So I'm going to start working with this gray basket in just a second. You'll see this one's a little bit bigger, so I'm going to show you how I like to deal with that. I just cut two pieces to fit and made sure that they overlap just a little bit. And you can see here, I'm going to put this in here and you'll see kind of have just this gap right here that I want to fill. So I cut this other piece. And I cut it so that it will overlay by two columns here. So I'm going to overlap these two, and then I'm going to just run a whip stitch around each of those, or through each of the two all the way down the columns. You'll see what I mean in just a second as I get started. So I'm just going to stitch these two pieces together, and then I'm going to roll it around, and I'll stitch the other side together so that they'll be attached and they'll fill out the basket. Because most of the time these canvas sheets come in, I think it might be a 24-inch, I can't recall, I'm sorry. One of the larger sizes they usually come in if you pick them up at store, like say Joann's, don't quite make it around a basket that's anything bigger in diameter than about 6 inches. So to get around that, I just sew 2 pieces together, and then I'll show you later in the video how I turn it toward the front so that you can't see it as well. Okay, so I'm going to take these 2 and line them up. Again, I've cut them so that they line up 2 columns overlapping each other, and then I'm just going to whip stitch this together. Nothing fancy here. I like to use the 2 columns so that I can run it all the way around instead of doing a back stitch. And then I accidentally caught this here, but I do like to go ahead and tuck that and run several rows of stitches around it to just go ahead and work that tail in so that I don't have to mess with it later. And then I'm going to speed this video up and show you what this looks like when it's done. So I've sewn in my tail, I'm snipping that off, and then I'm going to thread my needle, and then I'm going to fold this around and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so again, I'm just going to whip stitch this around all the way down. Same process as the first section, but now we're just joining the 2 ends together. It's pretty straightforward, I'm sure you get this part, so I'm going to speed this up again so you can see what it looks like when it's done, and then we'll insert it. Okay, so I'm going to finish sewing in my tail here, and then we will insert this into the basket, and I'll show you another way to stitch and attach it. And you can decide which method you prefer. You can see this is pretty sturdy because I've overlapped those 2 edges and then sewn them together. So it's, you know, not a complete piece, but it'll do the trick. And then I'm going to insert it and just get it in here. And then once I do that, I'm going to turn it around. I like those seams to be towards the front of the basket, assuming it has a front. I want it to be towards the front of the basket so that when it's sitting on a shelf or something like that, the seam will not be obvious if you can see inside the basket. And as a different note, you can also always stitch up a liner that you could put you know, you could sandwich the canvas between if you wanted to completely hide it. It doesn't bother me to have it showing, but you could stitch a liner in single crochets or whatever you like, and then line the inside of it, and then you have a super sturdy basket. Alright, so I'm going to stitch down. Instead of stitching into the top stitch, I'm going to stitch down in the bottom of the first stitch. And I got a little off my camera here, so bear with me. I'm going to show you exactly where I'm placing this in just a second. But basically, I'm just following the part of the stitch that is basically here. So, okay. In the case of this basket, I stitched in the back loop, so you can see that I have bars running across the basket. So I'm basically just following the side bar of the stitch. So I'm working below the first row, and I'm just following along and matching the yarn to that bar that's running across the stitch. And I'm not going to back stitch this, I'm just going to do a simple stitch all the way around. This will be enough to tack this on and hold it sturdy. But yeah, you can see I'm just working into the bottom of that first row and kind of disguising it into the center of the stitch. And I'm going to speed this up, and you can just see what it looks like when it's done. You really can't tell where the seam is when you do it this way, but you're more likely to have a little bit of that raw edge from the canvas showing up along the top of the basket. So you just kind of have to decide which method you prefer. I like the whip stitch best, but this is another perfectly reasonable option to attach your canvas. And actually, while I'm doing this, it's funny because while I was filming this part, my Samantha, my daughter, she's 4 years old, she was digging around in the peace lily that sits next to my filming space. And so if you follow me on TikTok, this was the basket that I was working on when I made that TikTok video, because she was talking to me about, I don't know, snails and worms, and which none of these things exist inside my peace lily. I have no idea why she was doing that, but it was funny. So anyway, if you want to check that out, you can go check it out and listen to the actual audio that was happening on my TikTok video. I'm Classy Lady Yarnworks over there as well. Okay, so all done with that stitching. You're going to want to sew those tails in just like before. But you can just see it's just a simple stitch all the way around to tack that on. And again, the basket's just nice and sturdy. Even though that's two separate pieces, it's still nice and sturdy. It's got plenty of spring, plenty of form, and it just makes for a much more useful basket. Yeah, so if you have any questions about this, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And if you like this video, if you like this tip, feel free to tap that like button and subscribe. I do put out tips, tutorials on stitches, and I just try to generally put out useful information. I'm a crochet designer by trade. This particular set is an I Heart Balls set. The big basket is not shown here, but you can find the designs in my other sweary designs in the description of this video. And then let me know which method you like best. Do you prefer the whip stitch? Do you prefer the, I don't know what you call this, it's not a back stitch. Which method do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Keep doing you, and thanks so much for watching.